Hyperbole aside, the future of our nation may hinge on this primary election and who Republicans choose to put in the governor's mansion, because as Texas goes, so goes our nation. It's that time again, Texas. Time for some straight talk with three conservatives vying to become Texas' 46th governor. I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is the Bunker Bob Show. Welcome back, friends, to the last and possibly most important of 10 Republican candidate forums held here in the bunker, which is the race for Texas governor. Now, it's impossible to miss the fact that missing from this forum is one of the key conservatives in the race, Allen West, who was scheduled to be here on February 3rd, which was the same day that most of our state was covered in ice and travel was just not possible, especially in the more rural areas of Texas, which is where the bunker is located. It's been no secret that as a longtime Republican activist who has never missed a Republican state convention since turning 18, I have been a big fan of Colonel West and his ascension as chairman to the state party of Texas. In fact, in my show about America being driven back into bondage, I put Colonel West in the Bunker Bob Hall of Fame and publicly disagreed with those within the party who asserted their belief that Colonel West was only running for party chair so that he could run for governor, which was something that I had no problem with. Since I firmly believe that while that may have been the case, I assumed that he would only do so after he had served for at least 4 years. Instead, he served for less than one before jumping into the governor's race. So the musings of those who now argue that Colonel West's effort to win the governorship is just another stepping stone, a platform to run for president in 2024, is to me a fair concern, and one that I had hoped to have addressed with him directly. Now, I have no problem with someone from outside the state being our governor, especially a noted conservative like Allen West. However, the fact that Colonel West is so new to the great state of Texas and has so little experience in working in and around the state legislature, again, less than a year, concerns me, and I think should concern every Republican who has been frustrated over Governor Abbott's either unwillingness or inability to ensure that the legislative priorities established by state delegates at our last convention went unfulfilled. Additionally, there were also some votes that Mr. West cast as a member of Congress that, as a conservative, concern me. So I wanted to give Colonel West the opportunity to address this, especially since his legislative inexperience compounds the concern that he's not here to help lead Texas, but start a new campaign for president. You know, past actions are the best predictor of future behavior. And I think it's reasonable for us as Republicans to expect to hear from Mr. West that he will not run for president in 2024. No way, no how. That his job, if elected, will be the governor of Texas and nothing else. So if someone sends me links to Mr. West saying that he has no plans, that he will not, hasn't even considered it, that is not something he is focused on, please don't, because that is not an answer. That's political speak. And we deserve, as Republicans, some straight talk. Governor Abbott is also not a part of this candidate forum for obvious reasons. He has had 8 years to demonstrate by his actions where he stands on the questions that I'm asking. Now, that said, we are reaching out to the Abbott campaign to see if he will grant me a one-on-one interview where I will ask him to defend his actions, which have disappointed so many of us. Since he's so far ahead in the polls, I doubt that he's going to do anything that may detract from his campaign message, like granting me an interview. However, while he may be ahead in the polls, what's clear about this race is that there are enough Republican challengers with a groundswell of support from the grassroots that a runoff election is a very real possibility. If that happens, as history proves, he will lose the election because all of Abbott's challengers and their supporters are united in unseating him. One of the things to watch for is a high voter turnout, which would be bad for the governor since that means people are getting out to vote who don't normally go to the polls. So I hope you see why this candidate forum is so important to take time and watch. As for the many other candidates in the race, including the guy named Rick Perry, who's not the former governor, he's just hoping voters won't notice, and others, I wanted to focus on the most likely candidates to face Governor Abbott in the runoff and for the most interesting, or both. Now, I always want to give candidates the opportunity to put their best foot forward, which is why, as I have always done, the candidates received a copy of the questions before they had to decide to participate. Through the magic of video, it appears that all candidates are in studio at the same time. However, each one sat down with me for a one-on-one interview, which is edited together to create the illusion that they are here at the same time. This is why I will ask follow-up questions of one candidate but not the other, and why candidates do not respond to one another's answers. In fact, the first time that any of the candidates will have heard the answers from their opponents will be after this show has been broadcast. Now, I never place time limits on candidates' answers. However, in most of the candidate forums, I've edited down some of the answers for time. Now, that being said, however, I found that not only did these three candidates provide an unfiltered view of their positions on the issues, the answers they gave were so compelling that I decided to give you the benefit of their answers in full, with the exception of when a candidate veers off topic significantly, which is why this show is so much longer than all the rest. So I want to highlight that, as with all 10 candidate forums, in the description of this show is a listing of each question along with a time code where you can jump to the questions that most interest you and or the candidate whose answers you're most interested in hearing. If you're watching this on YouTube, those time codes are actual links that will actually enable you to jump to that point in the show. Now, before every interview, I let each candidate know they can re-answer or restate anything they say because the purpose is for them to be the best that they can be. But I also want to point out that none of them took me up on that offer, nor did they request that I not include something they said, because what's clear about all three is that they are firm in their convictions and uncompromising in expressing them. So, let me introduce the candidates for today's show, and I want to start with a man who is known as the modern-day Will Rogers, and that, of course, is Chad Prather, who is equally at home on stage or screen, musing on pop culture, politics, and family life to whatever inspires him on that day. Prather's hilarious YouTube feeds are picked up by hundreds of thousands of fans as well as media. He has been on CNN, Fox News, Blaze TV, on and on and on. He's built a successful entertainment business and apparel company and has pastored 3 churches. Chad spent over a decade in third world countries doing mission, humanitarian, and medical work. He's taught seminary, master's level Greek. Served on numerous boards, including American Valor with the family of Chris Kyle. But we all know why you're really here. You're here to try to get the 1,500 subscribers that
100%.
Yeah, I figured,
100%.
You guys only have like 650,000. I realize that that's what this is all about.
So, you know what? We can't let the little guy have all the fun, right? No.
Yeah,
no.
that's awesome.
Thanks for having me. I'm fascinated. I go back to when I first started podcasting. I had little home studio set up at the kitchen table, and I miss those days. Now, what you have here is phenomenal.
Okay.
This is a great setup. I'm admiring the look on the camera, the whole thing, the backdrop. Because I see some people who try to do this, and it's not great. You've got a professional deal going here.
Well, yeah.
And I'm envious, honestly, of what this setup.
No. We're not going there.
I promise you I am.
We're not going there. I'm glad that you are slumming it today, but I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And now let me introduce Danny Harrison. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina, Danny has been a resident of Dallas, Texas since 1967. He attended Stephen F. Austin State University, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. In 1989, he opened Harrison Landscape and Design. He has grown the company into a successful commercial residential landscape maintenance and construction company. Danny is a devoted family man. He and his wife, Tracy, live in the uptown area of Dallas. Tracy attended Liberty University and is a college counselor at Trinity Christian Academy. Danny has an 11-year-old daughter, Raven, and Tracy, a 21-year-old daughter, Lexi, who is a senior at the University of North Texas at Dallas, where she is studying public health. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. Well, in 2014, Don Huffines ran against what's known in Texas as a legislative piece of the furniture, which is basically a long-time entrenched incumbent that does little more than take up space in the state legislature. And in this case, it was Senator John Corona in the 16th. Now, Huffines ran to the right of Corona, and I have to say, that's not hard. So that's not saying much, but he highlighted Corona's record as one of the top rhinos in the legislature and did the impossible. He won the primary against an entrenched incumbent, a longtime popular incumbent, and he went unchallenged in the general election as well. During his time in office, Huffines authored many bills addressing Republican priorities. These included legislation on constitutional carry, term limits, and anti-abortion policy. Huffines consistently voted along the conservative line for conservative legislation. And one even named Huffines, a political scientist named Huffines one of the most conservative members of the Texas Senate. Now, here's what I love. And as I was digging, I pulled this out. In 2017, Huffines introduced legislation to require a 30% voter turnout for any bond election in Texas to be successful. Where have you been all my life? I mean, wow. And you know, and it is true. Most elections have abysmal turnouts. 10% is the average. In Rockwall, we just had a bond election, very low voter turnout. But what I find funny is the San Antonio Express News claimed that were Huffines' bill to become law, the result would be effectively putting most taxing entities out of the bond business. And what I can't figure out is, are they saying that's a bad thing?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, they are.
They are.
Yeah, that's a liberal media for you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Don is a proud fifth-generation Texan, husband, father, grandfather, and best of all, a self-made entrepreneur. A committed conservative, Huffines is fighting to safeguard Texans' elections, phase out property taxes, and secure the border once and for all. Senator, it is great to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, let's get started with the questions. And
okay.
First one is what makes you the best choice for Texas conservatives to elect for governor of Texas over incumbent Governor Gregg Abbot and the many Republican challengers that are in the race? Senator?
Well, I like a lot of Republicans, or most Republicans in the state of Texas. We're all frustrated. We're angry. We're tired. We're tired of the lies. We're tired of the broken and empty promises. And but the questions out there: is the border secure? Are your property taxes going down? Do you have confidence in your elections? Are we winning this culture war? And of course, the answer is all no on all that. And I've got comprehensive solutions for those issues. And the most important thing is to remember is that I don't need a new job. I'm not.
No, you don't.
I don't need a new career.
Yeah.
And it puts me at a distinct advantage over everyone else running in this race because I'm not worried about the political ramifications or consequences or being politically correct. I'm worried about solving the problems that affect Texas. And I've got the solutions. I got the courage to implement the solutions. Bob, I remind you that according to the Secretary of the Senate, when I was there, when I started in 15, the 85th, I was in the Senate for 4 years. She told me I was the only elected office holder in modern Texas history that was in Austin that never took a penny from the government. Huh. No pay, no pension, no health care, no travel vouchers, no reimbursements. I never took anything from the state of Texas, including their office furniture.
Is that right?
That's really true. Oh my gosh. And to me, it was just the way I am. It wasn't to send a statement. Nobody knew that. But I point that out because I never wanted to work for the government. I never liked the government. I worked for the people that hired me. Now, of course, I'm going to continue that tradition in the governor's office, in the mansion. I'm never going to use the governor, take the salary, excuse me, or pay or pension or health care or anything else when I'm governor.
Yeah.
I don't, and I'm here to solve the problems.
You know, you remind me a lot of Donald Trump because in so many ways. One, he is a businessman. I never understood why he wanted to be president. Why he would stoop down to become president of the United States. I mean, and you're very much the same way. I mean, you did it the wrong way, and I don't know that you understand that. You're supposed to go to legislator, then become rich, then leave. You know, and you did it the opposite way. So I mean, when you think about it, what motivates you? What drives you?
Freedom and liberty. I have a passion for liberty that started when I was a teenager. I've always, over the years, I remember distinctly in 17 reading books about classic liberalism, which was being conservative.
That is a conservative, yeah.
And
Milton Friedman. And,
exactly. It was Friedman's books, Murray Rothbard's books, and others. And so I got active in the Reagan campaign against Ford in 76 as a volunteer teenager. And my parents were not political. They were typical Texas Democrats. And I went to my first Republican convention when I was 18 by 2 weeks, a county convention up in Denton County.
Oh, okay. I'm
a fifth generation Texan. I was born in Dallas, Texas, grew up in the Metroplex, and I'm a lifelong conservative activist, a little bio. But ever since then, I've just always supported a lot of candidates over the years in the Republican Party. I've been a delegate to many state conventions over the last decades and delegate to 3 national conventions.
Wow.
But I just am so frustrated when I beat Corona in 13, because and I always say this in my talks, have you ever met a Texas Republican that didn't say they're a conservative?
No, that's exactly right. Never have.
And you won't.
No.
And you know what? 90% of them are liars.
That's exactly right. God bless you.
They're all liars.
You're right.
And you know what? When I served with them, they knew they were lying. And I could tell you a lot of stories on that, but that's why I ran to beat Corona. I was tired of our Republican Party platform being ignored. And because for years we control everything for 20 years down there. Back then it was a little less, the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and they ignore it completely. So I just have a passion for freedom, to cut the chains of government. Our founders knew that the biggest threat to your God-given liberties was the very government they were creating. They knew it was a classic liberal idea that your liberties come from God and not the government. And I would point to people today, if you go to Europe or something today, or most countries in the world, they still don't get that.
No, I agree.
They just don't understand that. And unfortunately, a lot of people in America have forgotten that, that the fundamental role of government is always to protect your God-given liberties. These are rights and not privileges. And so another way of saying what's the fundamental role of government is to protect you from government.
Amen.
Because government's the only threat you really have.
Yes.
And so that's the lens I look through. And so I'm trying to re-educate Americans and Texans about that. And to protect what we really aren't protecting. And we've lost so much liberty.
Yeah.
In the last 19, 20 months, I never thought this was possible, Bob. I really didn't.
I didn't either. I am shocked.
It's beyond shocking.
Yeah.
And so that was the catalyst for me to run. I've got to step up and try to save Texas so we can possibly save the country, because this was done to us.
Yes.
By a Republican governor of Texas. This is Texas.
Yes.
Closing our churches, 3 million people out of a job, destroying your businesses. I mean, and forcibly making you wear a mask, and possibly vaccine mandates, and everything just goes on. Is by a Republican of Texas.
Yeah.
There's no courage. There's no courage in our country. There's no courage in our party. There's no courage in Texas. So I'm going to fix that.
Awesome. Why do you believe that you're a better candidate than, you've got some good people that are running?
Yeah.
Why are you better than they are?
I could not imagine being governor of Texas without being in that swamp in Austin.
What do you mean by that?
That legislative swamp.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're governor of Texas and you were never in the legislature, it would be after being there, I see how lost they would be, how much they're going to get run over by the lobbyists, and they wouldn't even know who to trust. They don't know the players. They don't know all the acronyms. They don't know the committees. They don't know who's been committee chairman. They don't know all the agencies. They might not even know our legislative fiscal year. I mean, I don't know what they know, but there's a ton of a learning curve, let me tell you. You wouldn't even know where the bathroom is.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
And it's a big building.
It is. Yes, it is.
But, and so I just think that's a huge leg up. It gives me an opportunity to get off to a running start. It gives me an opportunity to get a leg up. I know what those guys want and what all the legislators really want. I know what it's like to be in that club, this exclusive club, the know-it-all club. That's what it's all about. I know what liars they are.
Yeah.
And I know who really the liars are and aren't. And I tell you what makes them tick. I know the tools in the governor's toolbox that he can use. You've never seen him used like I'm going to use him. Abbott was never in the legislature. He didn't understand how to work. He's supposed to be the mediator between the House and the Senate. He's supposed to be the leader of the Republican Party of Texas. He's the governor of Texas. One thing I tell everybody on the campaign trail when I give my talks is to remember that the governor of Texas can get almost any bill done almost any time he wants.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's the governor of Texas. He's the leader of the Republican Party. So all this angst about not getting our legislation done is directly because of Abbott doesn't want it done. If he wanted it done, it'd all be law. He's the one that empowered Strauss for years. He's the one that empowers Phelan. And when he said, what's the governor always say? Most people will remember this, you might not, but the common refrain from the governor's office, well, if it gets to my desk, I'll sign it.
Yes, that is what he says. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, if it gets to my desk, I'll look at it. I'll get to my desk and sign it. What a cop-out.
Yeah.
All he does is send his minions down to the Capitol, which he's got dozens of them, to kill it before it gets there. Yeah. He can call the committee chairman. They get a hold of the committee chairman, make sure that bill never sees the light of day. He calls the speaker. He's the one that decides with the speaker what they're going to get on the Texas Republican Party platform into law. We don't, that's why we still sexually mutilate our children. That's why we don't have taxpayer-funded lobbying. That's why we don't have school choice or education freedom. And I can go all the way down the list. Most things are downstream of the governor's office in the state of Texas. Our virtue, our culture, all the appointments the governor makes, hundreds if not thousands of appointments to every committee you can possibly imagine, the Health and Human Services, Texas Education Agency, which is 80% of our budget, the Medical Board, the Pharmacy Board, the Real Estate Commission, River Boards, you name it, and the one that most people don't think about, the Board of Regents of every university and every college.
Ah, yeah, that's right.
And that's where the poison starts.
Boy, isn't it? That's so true.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I love those answers. Danny, how would you answer that?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it's an easy one for Governor Gregg Abbott. Governor Gregg Abbott is a career politician. He's never worked in the real world. He's never set foot in the real world. He doesn't understand small business. He doesn't understand entrepreneurship, and his decision-making reflects that.
Why do you say that?
Well, when you shut down during COVID, when you shut down $70 billion worth of industry of hotels, restaurants, bars, gyms, salons, movie theaters, having running at 25 or 50%, having bars shut down indefinitely, but at the same time, you have Costco, Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot running at 100%. That doesn't sound like a friend of small business. And because of that decision, we lost over 12,000 businesses in Texas. I personally lost over $300,000 in our commercial landscape business. And to me, that's how out of touch he is. I think those businesses deserve deserve to put the proper protocols in place to stay in business and let the free market decide what happens, not Governor Gregg Abbott. And then I'll add another thing. When COVID hit, the federal government gave Texas $300 million right at the beginning to deal with it. He used that money to trace and quarantine Texas, not only infringing on people's personal liberties and freedoms, but COVID was spreading like crazy. He gave that money to a company
to trace and quarantine Texas. The company had no history of doing it all, didn't have the resources to do it. Quite frankly, no company would have had the resources to do it. In a state of 30 million people, I thought it was another decision that reflects a career politician, and that money went right down the drain. And that money could have gone to the small businesses that were hurting. That money could have gone to a lot of the nursing homes that were under siege. It was out of touch. I don't think he gets it. And so that bothers me. In regard to the other candidates,
Yes.
I think Huffines is a good man. I like Huffines. He comes from a family with a lot of money. I think, and it's not his fault, but I do think we need somebody that understands the hardworking men and women of Texas, understands the street level. I think there's a disconnect there. I don't know if he really understands truly the hardworking men and women of Texas. That may be an unfair criticism, but I feel it in my gut. I think with Colonel West, once again, a good man, and God bless him for serving our country, but he's been playing politics for 15 years. I think he's jaded by the political process. I think we need something completely from the outside. I think the difference between Abbott, Huffines, and West is the difference between a Ford, Chevy, and a Dodge. I think we need something refreshing completely from the outside that's a true entrepreneur and at the street level. I think Prather is a good man. I like Prather, but I don't think he has that deep-rooted business experience that you need to be governor of Texas. And I've got it. So that's what I think.
Chad?
You know, when I jumped into this thing, my whole platform was let's get government out of our lives. Let's make government smaller. We've seen an increase of spending that's gone up by 19% in the last 7 years since Gregg Abbott's been in office. We've seen a population growth of 5.5%. So our spending is far expanded beyond what we can sustain with population growth. We've seen an increase in numbers. We've seen a $48 billion spending increase. I woke up September 1st with 666 new laws in my life. I didn't want that. I wasn't expecting that. The government in Austin's gotten big. It's gotten big. It mirrors Washington, D.C. in a lot of ways. It's starting to mirror Sacramento in California in a lot of ways in terms of how it's consuming and leaving people in its wake. So I'm not a politician. I'm reluctant at best. I didn't want to be in politics. I didn't want to run for office, but I wanted to. I got to a point where I had to put my money where my mouth was, so to speak. I can sit on political media and run my mouth, which is very therapeutic. It's not always the most productive thing, but it's very therapeutic for me.
Sure.
I can run my mouth, or I could do something about it. And so I saw an opportunity to step in and run with the conviction of let's make the insiders outsiders. Let's bring some outsiders in, and let's get government out of our life. Let's reduce the spending. Let's reduce the overreach, the bureaucracies and the bureaucrats, the appointed people, the lobbyists, these people who are not elected representatives. They don't have delegated authority with the priorities of the people who are truly controlling our lives. And let's make a change in Austin. Because I think that based on the numbers, people always kind of pull back on me when I say this. Based on the numbers, we know we have an untenable future if things stay the way they are. I think we've got about 6 years before we really start to look like California. And the timeline is speeding up exponentially right now with no anticipation of it ever slowing down. So I remind people, I say, this is Texas is not the Texas that most Texans think it is anymore. Yeah. It's just really not. So I'm the guy that wants to get government out of your life. I don't want to expand it in any way. I want to see things folded into one another as far as state agencies are concerned. I want to see spending cut. I want to see heads roll. And it's not going to be a popular way to enter into Austin, Texas, but I think it's the only way we can save what I consider the Republic of Texas.
So, yeah, the thing is, everyone that's running wants to do that, but what makes you the person that can make that happen?
Well, I'm coming at it from an outsider's perspective.
Exactly.
I've got skin in the game. I've felt the pain of big politics overreach. I know what it's like to have the greedy bureaucrats' bony fingers in your pockets. I know what it's like to feel the increase of the property tax. I'm coming at it from a working stiff's perspective. I'm a blue collar guy. I came from nothing. I made a living running my mouth, which some people love to make fun of. But at the end of the day, I'm an American story, and I know that for me, had it not been for Texas, I moved to Texas 21 years ago. Texas became the center of the universe. To me, Texas is a spirit more than a geography. It's caught, it's not taught. Once you catch it, it's more contagious than COVID. You want to give it away. And people either get it, or they don't get it. But once they get it, they can't unget it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So For me, Texas was the soil in which to plant the seed, which was my life. I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be enjoying the successes that I have. I wouldn't have the opportunities that were afforded me had it not been for Texas. I don't want us to lose that. I'm running against a guy who's a career politician. I'm running alongside two other gentlemen, specifically one who's retired military as well as politician, retired officer as well as a politician, and then a businessman who as well as a politician. I don't come from those backgrounds. I'm not a military guy. I'm not some guy that's built some major corporation and served in the Senate. I'm a guy who's looked in his mailbox, saw the bills that are coming in, and saying this is untenable for the state of Texas. We can do better than this. We need to be better than this. We don't lead the nation in anything statistically, and that shouldn't be true in Texas. When we're ranked in the high 30s, low 40s in terms of opportunity, healthcare, education, and so on down the line statistically, that's just not the Texas that we need to be proud of. And when we're compared consistently to the freedoms of South Dakota or even the leadership of Florida, I don't like that. I want Texas to be Texas and us to be number one and us to be the bastion that everybody looks at and says, we want to be like them.
I love everything you're saying, and I think the viewers will too. The question is, the problem that we have is we have somewhat of a swamp right here in Texas. You agree? I agree with you on your assessment of that we're looking more and more like D.C. The problem is we have so many what they call pieces of the furniture, people who have been in the House or Senate forever, and they know how to wrangle things around. They understand how the proverbial sausage is made. So you're coming in as not just an outsider. I mean, a real unknown as far as when I say unknown, you've never really stepped foot in the Capitol, and as far as being elected to the House or Senate.
Right.
So it takes a while to get your bearings on pretty much anything. I wonder what is it? What do you think you can do to kind of speed up that learning curve that you're going to get on day one as governor?
Well,
you understand the question?
Sure, of course, and I'll back up a little bit and kind of come into it another way.
Okay.
Because obviously all of this is like it's on the job training. It's trying to take a sip from a fire hydrant. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's coming your way.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty quick learner, pretty quick read in that regard. The thing that I hate about it all is just the swampiness of it, the cesspool aspect of it. In the grand scheme of things, the government that our founding fathers gave us, and even the founders of Texas and the Texas Constitution, didn't give us a real difficult thing. It wasn't that hard to keep people free. The problem is people, they really fight back against that idea of liberty. They really do, especially when you have the people over you that treat you like minions and want to take it away from you at their own personal gain.
Yeah.
So to that degree, I go back to where have we come from? When I first got into this primary race, this was 18 months ago. This was July of 2020. I was the first guy that said he was going to try to primary Gregg Abbott. I was the first guy in. And people said there's no chance. You don't have a shot. But here I am, a guy who has spent comparatively no money compared to these other guys.
Yeah.
A Gregg Abbott who has a virtual bottomless pit. I mean, he could talk about having $60 million in a campaign war chest. That's politispeak for saying we have unlimited money and resources. I know that Don Huffines has raised quite a bit of money. Alan West has a decent war chest as well, but he's got name recognition to make up for a lot of that, as well as being a political personality. But we've defied the odds. So I came along. I'm involved in the conversation regardless because of hard work, because of stick-to-itiveness, hanging in there, crisscrossing the state, working hard, getting in people's face and having a conversation with them and winning them over. So again, more politispeak, I say our grassroots movement is phenomenal, which is a politispeak for saying, grassroots is politispeak for saying we're broke. But in spite of that, we've made a difference anyway. So I say, with that same work ethic, let's get in there, let's get constitutional, I like to throw this phrase around. I think people kind of gloss over it when they hear it. I say, let's make Texas a constitutional sanctuary state. All right. If it doesn't line up with the Constitution, let's just not do it. If it doesn't line up there, then maybe we need to go another route. So if it has to be subsidized, if it has to be taxed, if it has to, have another agency thrown at it or another task force, it's probably not constitutional. So to that degree, let's set a litmus test, let's set a standard. Let it be the Constitution of the U.S. Let it be the Constitution of Texas. And let's let that be the standard. But at the end of the day, it's going to take hard work. Somebody's got to go in there that has some thick skin. God knows I do. I've been in the entertainment business for a long time, and political entertainment business at that. I've got a social media following of roughly 5 million people. I've got videos that have been viewed over 2 billion times. I've caught the trolls. I've dealt with the stuff, the naysayers and the complaints. I've got pretty thick skin when it comes to that. It's going to take somebody with thick skin. And not to say that any, Don or Alan, certainly, they're thick-skinned guys. I'm glad they're running. But at the end of the day, it's going to take somebody who's going to come in there and say, I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm not here for your public opinion polls. We're here to make Texas great again. And it is an OJT. And I don't care what anybody says. Anybody that's running for office, it is an on-the-job training. You don't know what you've got till you step into it, look at it face to face, and say, this is the situation. I'm uncovering things in the state of Texas that just blow me away, and I want your listeners to know that whether they vote for me or whether I'm ever in an office, I'm in this fight for the rest of my life. And that doesn't mean I'm running for another office or have political. I have no political aspirations whatsoever on a career side of things. God forbid. But I will fight for Texas for the rest of my life because I love this state and I want Texas to be first. I want Texas to be free. And so I'm in this thing. And most of it is because, just quite honestly, I've been ticked off. The things I see. We spend, constitutionally, we've got to have a balanced budget. Every 2 years, we balance a budget. We put that thing out there. And I always ask people, I say, does anybody know what operational fund transfers are? Nobody knows. It's always a glassy look. Operational fund transfers, that's the number one budget item we have. It's the biggest budget item. We spend $124 billion a year on operational fund transfers. Nobody knows what that is. No, you can't Google it and find out. Operational fund transfer, the best I can figure it out, basically means that you have all these agencies, all these committees, and they all have their budgets. If this one runs out of money, this one over here has surplus, they're going to send that money over there to make sure that money gets spent. They're not going to give refunds to the people of Texas, right? So the big spending's got to stay intact. So they have these operational fund transfers, which is a catch-all way of saying we're going to make sure we spend all the money we collect. These are the kind of things that people need to be aware of. They need to know this is what's going on in Austin. They've got to stop this nonsense. And it just continues to contribute to this nauseous big government concept that we've come to rely and depend on. And we won't push back because the average person out there, my gosh, Bob, they think that a primary is going to split an election. Yeah. That's how how ignorant we are when it comes to just pure civics. Yeah. So think about all the things that they are taking advantage of in Austin, Texas, based on our ignorance. We're being played. And that's the thing. We've got to get average, everyday people who are involved, educated. The lights come on. When I say that, sometimes my people out there, they like to troll me, and they say, yeah, your followers, those lights coming on is only a 7.5-watt bulb. But you know what? At least the light's coming on, and the light shines in the darkness.
I love it.
So that's what we've got to do. We've got to keep educating people and getting them involved.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. The next question is, do you have a faith, and if so, what is it, and how will it guide you if elected? Now, Chad, you've been a pastor for three times. Yeah. What, the congregation said they just couldn't take you? What's the deal?
Well, it's kind of funny. When I was young, I started doing mission work when I was about 19 years old. I started going, I can remember when I was a kid, in college, I wanted to go to these places like Africa and Southeast Asia and Central America, South America. And I'd hook up with these groups that were going. And I can remember I would collect change, big jugs, milk jugs of change. And I'd be sitting on the floor, Christmas break, counting out my pennies and my nickels and my dimes to get a plane ticket to be able to go to these places. And so I spent a better part of almost 15 years in third world countries, going in and out of them, sometimes spending extensive times in there, months at a time. Huh. And in that period of time, I always wanted to speak to people. I wanted to talk to people. So I was good on stage. I was good communicating my stories, and so churches would open up to me, and then you'd have people who come along and say, you're a great communicator. Why don't you pastor our church? And I'd say, well, I don't think you want me to pastor your church. And they'd say, no, we really do. We love the fire. We love the passion that you have. And I said, yeah, but I'm a good teacher. I'm a good speaker. I don't know that I'm a great pastor because I'm a bottom line kind of guy. Yeah. I'm not going to pat your bobo. Most people want their problems understood, not fixed.
Amen.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
So I'm a problem fixer.
They want you preaching, not meddling.
I'm a problem. I'm a fixer. Like, you come in and sit down with me, I'm going to tell you what the problem is, and we're going to fix your problems. Yeah. So I'm sort of one of those Old Testament prophets in that regard. There's a lot of black and white with me, and so and being young and full of the brimstone as I was in my early 20s, I wound up pastoring some churches. And the biggest problem those churches had is they grew. And a lot of those churches, they didn't want to grow. They grew in spite of the, and we'd be in there and they'd be like, oh, we don't know what to do about all of this stuff. So no, it was just a natural migration of things. I was pastoring a church, then it grew, and then we wound up starting a church, and so I took over that church. And then a friend of mine, we sort of swapped churches, and I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and pastored his church. He went to California, so three of us just kind of rotated. And everything we did was kind of a network of ministry. So it was a good organic thing. It wasn't just abandoning the people. And we kept a relationship there with those congregations. But I'm a Christian. I always tell people I'm a white heterosexual Christian male that burns up the ozone with his diesel truck. And even my dog and his flatulence sometimes contributes to the global warming. But and the dog's always in the back seat. But I am a Christian. I'm a believer. And had a conversion of faith back when I was a child, and. I have always been an outspoken proponent and fighter for pro-life, the pro-life movement. I wrote for the campus newspaper when I was at the University of Georgia, specifically on pro-life issues, conservative issues, but everything was from a faith-based perspective. I personally come from the standpoint that the most important issue we ever face is the sanctity of human life. All these other political issues don't matter if life doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay, the border issue doesn't matter. It's not a humanitarian crisis if these humans and their lives don't matter, right?
Yeah.
And same with property taxes. What difference does it make? I mean, why does money matter if your life doesn't matter? So on it goes. And so, everything that I do is based from a perspective. And I have, campaign people on my team who say, maybe ease off on the preaching a little bit. And I say, like when it comes to property taxes, I always remind people, I say, God told his Israelites, he told the Israelites in the Old Testament, he said, you're my people. I'm not going to tax your land because the land is the promise. It's the inheritance to your children and your children's children. So I say if the Israelites 6,000 years ago could figure out a way to navigate around property taxes, then surely the greatest conservative fiscal minds, economists here in Texas in the 21st century can figure out a way around this as well. So to me, like property taxes becomes a moral issue. If God didn't tax his people, why in the world are we taxing our people as far as the land is concerned? So I find it to be, I don't like taxation in any way, nobody does, but I do believe it's theft. I believe there's other ways around taxation, but taxation on somebody's land is immoral. So I tend to look at perspectives from a moral standpoint,
Yeah.
And so my faith guides what I do. Now, I'm plain-spoken. Don't get me wrong. I'm very plain-spoken. I'm very rough. I can be very abrasive. Anybody that watches the Chad Prather show knows that. I can be filterless. I get pretty passionate about things. But it all is tempered at the end of the day with where my faith lives.
That's awesome. And in case anyone is wondering why he has this permanent smile on his face, I didn't realize you were a Georgia Bulldog. So, Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Let me tell you how much I love
By
Texas.
the way, I'm a Texas Aggie, so we've got two of the greatest schools that defeated Alabama this year. So
thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. No, anybody that beats Alabama's my friend.
Yeah.
It makes people mad, man. The Roll Tide folks that's borderline cult, speaking of religion. No, I went to the University of Georgia, and we did, on the night of the national championship, we had two candidate debates or forums. Had one in the Woodlands and we had one in Conroe. So we went from one to the other all during the national championship game.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm sitting there going, all right. So while we traveled between the two, I was able to listen to the last 2 minutes of the first half. And then I was able to finally, when it was over, I was able to go next door to a restaurant and see the last 5 minutes of the game.
Goodness.
So basically the last 5 minutes, I saw the whole game.
There's the game. Yeah,
game.
Definitely.
But I was, people said, I can't believe you're not watching this football game. I said, man, I'm running for state office here. Kind of important. But to me, Texas, there'll be a football season next year, and there'll be a football season the year after that. I don't know if there's going to be a Texas the way we know it. And so to me, this matters. And yeah, but I am thankful that Georgia did what they did. It was about time somebody beat Nick Saban that used to coach under him. So
Amen. Well, the second one, yeah, and that was that's the other thing, yeah. Both our coaches are Saban guys, and ironically, my next door neighbors, they're Georgia Bulldogs. So this was it was fun around this area. So yeah, glad you guys pulled that up. But thank you for your answer on that, Mr. Huffines.
Well, I'm a conservative Christian. I homeschooled my children. I have 5 children, 4 boys and a girl.
Wow.
And we made sure they were homeschooled most of their schooling career so they could grow up in a good conservative Christian environment.
Wow.
And they did. And I'm proud of them. All 4 boys were Eagle Scouts. And
Wow.
and I have 4 Longhorns out of that bunch and 1
so
Horned
sorry.
Frog.
We'll forgive you.
There you go.
No, but
I know you're an Aggie.
yeah, so that's why you have to talk slow around me. But no, that's wonderful. It really is.
So, but my faith is very strong.
Yeah,
it dominates my life.
How will it guide you as governor?
Well, it's the compass I use completely.
Love that.
It really is. There's a lot of ways it guides me, but it's every day in meditation, every day in prayer. It's being thankful and appreciative and asking for guidance. One of the little goals is I want to get done is I want to put a little chapel in the governor's mansion in the yard of the governor's mansion.
Oh, I love that.
And so we can have service over there every day, and then the people of Texas can come into it.
Wow. Love it. Danny?
Well, I'm definitely a Christian, and I'm no doubt a man of faith. And I've mentioned earlier, I'm married to a woman that is a born-again evangelical Christian. She went to Liberty University. I see the power of faith every day. And I'm definitely a believer. I think it's the greatest story in the world, and without a doubt. And I would have loved to have been here when Jesus was walking on the earth. Can you imagine watching him talking and all the miracles that took place, and then the horrible things that took place, and just simply the death of Jesus and then the resurrection is unbelievable. And I can truly see that happening if I was there. So I'm a believer. And I think if the future of Texas and the future of this country really does depend on Christians, we have to stand up for our religious freedoms and liberties, and you have to have a governor that fights for that. But this country was founded by that. When you look at our founding fathers, and I've had people debate me on this, but their writings talk in detail about God and country. There's no doubt about it. God and country. When you go to Washington, D.C., every other monument talks about God and country. When you run for governor of Texas, if you're elected, you're going to put your hand on the Bible. It's one nation under God. We are a Christian nation, and we need to stay that way. Doesn't mean that we don't embrace other beliefs and religions and faiths. Yes. But if this country doesn't continue to be a Christian nation and we don't stand proudly as Christians, I think that's a negative thing for the future of our country, not a positive.
Very good. Chad?
Well, in a nutshell, it's never right to take people's constitutional rights by executive order. It's never good, it's never acceptable to strip anybody of their rights. Gregg Abbott's violated our constitutional rights in the last 18 months, somewhere, in my count, somewhere around 17 times now. And there's things people don't even realize. You know, back in July 2020, July 2nd, 2020, I was in South Dakota. We were waiting on President Trump to come speak at Mount Rushmore the following night.
Wow.
I'm sitting there at a dinner. Don Trump Jr.'s in the room. I'm having a glass of wine. My phone goes off, and it says that Gregg Abbott in the state of Texas is deeming certain businesses non-essential. He shut down the 51% establishments, the venues, the bars, the live music places, deemed more people non-essential. And that's when I made the decision. Again, I joke. I say I don't know if it was the wine or or if I was sitting with a Trump, but I went to Twitter. I took to Twitter and I posted that I was going to run. And there was a groundswell of support because I realized the angst. Everybody was really upset over this. They felt violated. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't go to weddings. Here everybody's going to George Floyd's funeral, including the governor.
Yes.
And nobody can go to their family's funerals. This was an insult. It was a slap to people's face and an affront to their liberty. And you couldn't go to the gym. Look, I don't want to go to the gym. But here's the thing. Well, here's what people don't realize. Read, and I'm telling everybody where I go around the state, read the fine print. Don't read the headline. Don't listen to the soundbite. Don't look at the R or the D by their name. Read the fine print. You know, Dan Crenshaw, he's not here to defend himself, but my gosh, he's got an R by his name, but the guy is really stepping in it these days.
I would
It's
agree.
a bad thing. You got to read the fine print.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing with Gregg Abbott. So, you know, when I sign a contract with a gym, the government constitutionally cannot step in and make that contract null and void. I have to be able to honor that contract. They have to be able to. So for Gregg Abbott to say you can't go to the gym in the state of Texas, that's a constitutional violation. You can't do those kind of things. So, you know, it's easy for people to, you know, people look at me and they say,
Well, you say he can't do those things. He did it.
he did it,
Chad.
but legally he can't do it. And the problem is we allowed him to do it.
That's the issue.
The key
yes.
is we allowed him to do it.
Yes.
We didn't push back. And we've become a mandate society. We've seen this happen with Joe Biden over and over with his mandates. Gregg Abbott's followed suit. We've seen so many governors who have done that. That is another way that we're bowing to the tyranny of the federal government and this administration. And I didn't like it. I didn't like shutdowns when Trump was in office. I don't want shutdowns when Biden's in office or anybody else. Constitutionally, you can't do that. So people keep asking me, they say, you know, or they tell me, they say, well, it's easy to play armchair quarterback and look back and say you would have done it differently. I said, no, let me tell you this. I've read the Constitution. I've read things on COVID. Don't understand the things on COVID. Neither do the doctors or the scientists.
Boy,
apparently.
evidently not.
They don't know.
Yeah.
But the Constitution wasn't written to keep you healthy, and the Constitution wasn't written to keep you safe. It was written to keep you free.
Amen.
All right?
Amen.
So when I start taking people's freedoms, that's not constitutional. The Constitution was written to protect you from the government that's over you. All right? Our founding fathers, when they put the Bill of Rights in there, some of them didn't want a Bill of Rights, okay? So they said, look, if you shouldn't need a Bill of Rights if there's a limited government. And then some of them said, well, what if it gets unlimited? We need this Bill of Rights. So, and we're seeing now where government's starting to get unlimited in its overreach and the mandates. That's when we need to come back to what protects our freedoms. I remind people, I say, you know, whenever Hurricane Harvey hit, we didn't have to get mandated to go help our neighbors. We loaded up the trucks and we drove south. He could have come in and honestly said, we're up against something we don't know what this is. This is new to us, but you're free, you're Texans, and you're responsible.
Yes.
So let's take care of each other.
Yes.
Let's do the right things. Let's figure out what the right things are together. You know, but to come in without any knowledge of what really was going on and just say, I'm going to take your job, shut down your business, steal your rights, and make you unemployed, unemployable. We're still seeing this in the state of Texas. We're still being subjected to this. He can write all the executive orders he wants. They're not worth the paper that they're written on. When you have these employer mandates, look, this Supreme Court judgment the other day is not good. It's
Right.
not good. So, you know, in one thing, they threw you a bone and said, okay, no employer mandated vaccines.
Except, yes.
But, you know, if it's federal funds or a federal employee, well, that's all of our healthcare workers. That's all of our law enforcement. That's our first responders. The people who take care of us. Those are the people who, and so ultimately it's going, now you go into the hospital. If the healthcare workers got to be mandated, well, you're not going to get healthcare unless you take the vaccine as well. So now the mandate, in essence, has done an end around to get you anyway. These are the kind of things we got to fight against.
Yeah.
Executive orders aren't going to save us from that. We've got to have legislation that not only makes it illegal, we've got to put teeth in the legislation where there's actual skin in the game for these companies like, say, United Airlines or American or Southwest. They want to lay off their employees without pay for 2 weeks until they go get a vaccine. Say, no, you do that on the soil of Texas, guess what? We're going to fine your company $25,000 a day per employee. You're going to feel the heat on this because if you're going to do business here, Texas A&M uses United Airlines. I think it's United. They use United Airlines to fly their football team, fly their boosters, fly their coaching staff, their band, everybody. What we do is we say, hey, we're at Texas University. We're not going to do business with United Airlines as long as you operate in the state of Texas and say that your employees have to be mandated in Texas to do this job. That's what I mean when we got to put teeth in it. The only thing they answer to is money.
Yeah.
And we've got the power and the leverage to be able to do stuff like that. But that's what Gregg Abbott should have done. He should have fought back instead of bowing to the power of the tyranny in Washington, D.C. And I think that's what got everybody upset.
Very good. Danny, how would you answer that?
Well, I can tell you straight up, I'm not going to strip anybody of their constitutional rights and state rights. That isn't going to happen at all. in regard to businesses, we'll let the free market decide what happens there. People will go to church no matter what. I don't care what the situation is. We're not going to stop people from worship and such. But like I said at the beginning, a governor that shuts down that much business, $70 billion worth of business, of restaurants, bars, gyms, salons, and such, but at the same time keeps Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart going at 100%, and those other businesses were shut down or running at 25, 50%, is just unbelievable. It's shocking to me. And we lost 12,000 businesses because of that. We think of how many people were on unemployment because of that decision. I would never shut down or constrain people's personal freedoms and liberties when it comes to business, when it comes to worship, or quite frankly, anything. And it's just something where we have to have a governor that the thought of just business closures alone, the thought of mask mandates, vaccine mandates, vaccine passports is shocking to me. And I'm not opposed to people taking the vaccine. I'm not opposed to people wearing masks. I'm opposed to these mandates and this liberal narrative that's being shoved down our throat. And so I will fight passionately to protect our freedoms and liberties from this kind of overreach from the federal government. And that's why we're seeing so many people pour in from Texas, from California, New York, going into Florida and stuff, because they're tired of this nonsense. And I take it personally because, boy, I lost a lot of money because of it. And I've seen so many people be strangled because of these crazy mandates and such.
You know, the argument is that people don't know what's best for them. So that's why the governor has got to step in. So the question is really, give me a scenario. Can you think of any scenario, any time, and any way that you would take away those rights from citizens?
Honestly, I don't see of any type of scenario where I would strip people's personal freedoms and liberties
En masse.
I don't see any situation other than if we were having riots and looting and things like that, where we may have to have some kind of martial law or shut down things for a temporary basis in regard to people's security and such. But these fundamental rights in regard to worship, in regard to business, in regard to vaccines, in regard to passports, I may not be answering this question quite directly the way you want it, but I think you see the general picture.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the public does.
Yeah, no, that very good. Thank you. Don?
I don't really, the fundamental role of government, Bob, is always, like we just discussed, is always to defend your God-given liberties.
Amen.
And I will do nothing to interfere with that. It's not my role. If the Constitution allows me to do something for whatever reason, emergencies or whatever, then maybe we would look at that. But the lens I look through is never to interfere with someone's God-given liberties.
So can you think of any situation where you would say, yeah, I'm going to take away I need to take away the rights of citizens, these God-given rights?
No.
Very good. I love straight talk. You know, citizens of Texas never truly own their property, since all private property is obligated to annually pay taxes based on the value that the state places on that property each year. This has resulted in many Texans losing their home to the state, even when mortgage-free, because they are unable to pay taxes on it due to the ever-increasing value assessed each year. So when do you think Texans should finally own their property? In other words, do you support an end to the state property taxes? And if so, how would you go about making this a reality without adding a state income tax? Now, Mr. Huffines, this is one of your, this is to me the flagship of your campaign, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly one of the flags.
It's certainly one of them, no
absolutely.
question. Yeah.
No, it is beside the border. But of course, I'll just set the table real quick for you on
Please,
it. You know, Texans really are tired of renting their homes from the government, and everything you see wherever you go, out the window of the car or whatever, every piece of property is owned by the government. Every piece of land, ranch, farm, your home, your your business. About half this tax is paid by businesses, and they even tax your inventory in your business, as you know. So you never own anything.
Yeah.
All you do is rent it from the government, and you don't have any control of what the rent's going to be. And with inflation and everything else, the rent just goes up and up because government never has enough of your money.
That's so true.
They don't. They never will.
Yeah.
Local governments, state governments, federal governments, they never have enough of your money. And this is a principle, a plank of our Republican Party platform to get rid of. It's a terrible way to fund government. This is not only a liberty issue, an economic liberty issue. This is about the money you're going to save, which is tremendous. Well, I've got lots of Excel spreadsheets. It's a math problem. We got them 6 inches thick. I've worked with Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Great group.
They are. They're a really good group.
Yes.
And they've got a great plan to eliminate the M&O tax. But mine goes further than that. I want to eliminate property tax entirely. So I'm taking their plan a little bit further. And it's going to take 8 to 10 years to gradually put it on a glide path to zero. It's not going to happen overnight.
Okay.
I'm going to make sure, of course, like you just said, we've got a constitutional amendment. We're never going to have an income tax. And I'm going to make sure the voters get the vote on it. So it'll be a constitutional amendment. No matter what happens, I want Texans to weigh in on this issue. So whatever the plan we get out of the legislature to get rid of it, everybody's going to vote. I'm going to move some of it over to consumption tax, sales tax, so that'll gradually go up. And we can get rid of this. We'll gradually phase it out. We're going to keep local political subdivisions that depend on ad valorem tax funded. We're going to cut state spending. And primarily how we're going to come up with the revenue. What we're doing is replacing ad valorem revenue with money that comes from the state of Texas. And we're going to use 90% of the excess revenue that comes from the state of Texas to buy down property tax. And that's why it takes a while to phase it out.
Oh, I see.
Our revenue right now grows at 8 to 10% annually from the state. The state has a lot of revenue buckets. We've got sales tax, oil and gas tax, hotel motel tax. It's just a lot of revenue buckets that continues to grow. Mainly we have sales tax. And we're going to use 90% of that growth and buy down property tax. And the math's all there. It works. Then the state of Texas will fund whatever the local subdivisions or political subdivisions are getting from ad valorem tax. They'll fund them out of the state coffers. So quick example would be if a city was getting $8 million, we'd have an 8-year plan, and they're getting $8 million in on property tax. We'll freeze it, and then the next year they'll get $7 million, and the $1 million comes from the state of Texas. Next year they'll get $6 million, $2 million comes from the state of Texas. So until it phases out completely. Same with school districts. I'm not talking about changing the funding formulas for school districts or anything like that. School districts are easy to deal with because right now the state pays about 55% of all the money into the school districts of what they collect. It's the largest thing the state of Texas spends money on. So, and when I was in the Senate, man, the schools were just so upset the state wasn't paying more of their share. And I said, well, it's okay. The state's going to pay all of it. You don't have to worry about it anyway.
Wow.
So that's the pushback from the teacher unions and things.
Oh,
so,
man,
but we're not changing the funding formula. So whatever the my plan is not. Whatever the school district gets today and how they're getting their money, they'll continue to get exactly that or more. We might grow the revenue for them, but not how they spend it. And so you can finally own your own home and your own business. I mean,
that would be amazing. What would prevent, instead of the tax going away, we've got now multiple sources so that we can grow big government bigger and bigger?
Well, the best thing is to have it as a constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Because that way
You said that.
the voters get to approve, and then it takes 2/3 again to change the Constitution. It's a real high barrier for them to bring it back.
Yeah.
And I tell you, we're not going to have 2 taxes in a Huffines administration.
I love
Either it goes away completely or we're not going to have 2 taxes because we've seen, look, you're going to have Abbott. You have a lot of politicians. Oh, we're going to lower property taxes. They never do. They come up with a scheme that survives a year or two and they trickle down maybe a few points or something. It's going right back up. And I tell you, if people are upset about their property taxes now, you give them 2 or 3 years of inflation the way it is.
Yeah.
Woo-wee. It's going to be tremendous.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's no cap on how much the appraisals can go up on anything except your homestead, which is 10%. If you got a rental property, this will create, our numbers right now, is interesting, show that it could be up to $200 billion of net worth created of Texans overnight.
Wow.
Because it was businesses. Now
Yeah.
the businesses are going to be able to hire more team members, do research and development, do whatever they want to do with their money, including homeowners. I mean, it's a massive wealth generation.
Wow.
And I want to be sure and emphasize, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
that
please.
this is not political rhetoric. This is not
Well, no,
this is
yeah.
not gamemanship. I'm not trying to. I'm telling you the facts.
Mhm.
I'm going to get this done, and we're going to work. I know how to get things through the legislature, and we're going. This is very doable. It's very achievable, and
Yeah.
Texans deserve it.
As I interview the lieutenant governor candidates, one of the biggest frustrations that I have, because really what I'm trying to do is identify the rhinos in our state and in our local communities, and it's hard to do that when they don't get a chance to vote on something. So things don't get to the floor for a vote. So we can't say, so they can say, well, I fought for it, when they never did. So if it doesn't come to the floor, we can't identify those rhinos. So how do we overcome that?
Well, like here, let me just reveal what these legislators really want more than anything, because I've been there.
Okay.
To move up in the food chain in the club.
Yeah.
And it's all a club.
Yeah.
No, it really is.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they'll tell you that.
Yeah, yeah.
They try to brainwash you when you're a freshman. The leadership came in right after inauguration in 2015. I'll give you the story.
Yeah.
And the day after inauguration, they called a meeting of the caucus as a whole, all the senators, only 31 of us. We represent more than a congressional district. And so all the senators go in there, Democrats and Republicans. There was 20 Republicans when I was there. There's 18 left. And they say, welcome to the club. Welcome to the most exclusive club in the state of Texas. This is a quote.
They really say that.
They really
Yeah.
did. There's less than 150 of you still alive.
Wow.
You're so fortunate to be here. You're so lucky. You'll never do anything to hold your club members accountable or embarrass them. And they just go off on this multiple occasions.
Wow.
So they very much are aware of that. And so am I, because I've served in the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
What they want to get done is a bill. They really want to get legislation passed. That's why they have their staff. That's why they have policy experts. And everything's about how many bills you can get passed. How many bills did you file? How many did you get out of the Senate? How many did you get to the governor's desk? Well, guess who gets last call on every bill?
The governor.
Yeah, the governor. I don't care if I veto 700 bills. My agenda is a Republican Party agenda and my campaign promises. Yeah. Until I get that all out of the legislature, everything else is dead.
Oh, wow!
I mean, that's just a fact. It's just common leadership. It's common sense. That's the tools in the toolbox. We can have the shirt. We can have the stick or the carrot.
Yeah.
And I'm here to work with them too. But they can all go home till they get my stuff done.
Yeah, I love it. Thomas Jefferson talked about, about legislation passing new laws, and he said if you think that a law needs to be enacted, put it in committee, and then if it goes through long enough and it passes, and it has the votes, then wait a year and see if that law is really necessary. That will avoid multiple laws, unnecessary laws, and the limits of freedom or liberty from taking hold. Well, obviously, I mean, you just kind of identified one of the biggest problems that I have with our legislature is it's all about how many laws you make or how many bills you pass, and I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. I think the fewer bills we pass sometimes is a much better thing. Is it different? Because I'm looking at it from Jefferson's point of view, the United States Congress. Is it different for the state of Texas?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
I think you're probably right. Unless the law we're going to pass is restoring the liberties that have been stolen from us, and taken from us, and it's very rare.
It is rare,
very rare.
Yeah,
those were the things I filed. I filed a lot of term limit bills, and
I love that.
Yeah. One thing I'll tell you about term limits that that most people don't think about.
Yeah.
But the Republicans in Washington, Newt Gingrich did.
Mm-hmm.
In 94, when we had the Contract for America,
Yes.
he did,
Yeah.
One thing that he thought about that's still around in D.C. that I really like, I copied, was committee chairman of committees could only be there for 6 years.
Huh.
And every session in Congress, the Republican Party in Washington re-ups that rule. It's a rule. And that's a very valuable rule.
Huh.
The Democrats don't do it. But it used to be in D.C. that you could be a committee chair for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they keep that around.
Okay.
My bill called for the committee chairmen to only have potentially to be a committee chair of a committee for 6 years. And to make that a state law. And also the Speaker of the House could only be Speaker for 6 years. He'd be term limited.
Whoa.
But
Wow.
that's how it used to be in Texas.
Yeah.
Most
it did?
yeah, in Texas, it was the way we operated. Yeah, for 100 years, what the speaker generally stepped down after 2 years or 4 at the most. It wasn't until the late 70s that we started getting this tenure of speakers and people lasting a long time. But I'm for term limits from the dog catcher to the governor.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Chad, how would you answer this?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that property tax is immoral. And let me qualify that by saying I believe in the legacy of no state income tax. We shouldn't have state income tax. We should continue our constitutional legacy in regards to that. To be able to say, no one can come in and say, if you elect me, we're going to get rid of property taxes tomorrow. All right. It's a cancer that's grown on the organ, and it's a vital organ, and it is a malignant cancer. Its tentacles are everywhere. Somebody with surgical precision is going to have to come in and move this out. We've got to put the best economic, fiscally conservative minds to this task of saying, here's the deal. We're going to cut spending. We're going to cut the fat. We're going to get this handled at the top. And now on the local level, because we haven't had a state income tax since 1982, this is handled at the local level. We're going to demonstrate from the top, but we're going to make sure that we affect some change here on the local level so that we can start to reduce this immediately with the goal ultimately of abolishing it. And again, we treat it like a moral issue, right? If I can't own my land, when you think of Texas, what do you think of? You think of oil, gas, you think of JR unit, you think of ranches, you think of land.
Yes.
And then when people can't own that, they rent it from the government. That's a moral issue. We ought to all, everywhere I go, people say, oh, well, you could never do that. I say, well, let's figure out a way to do it. Why are we continually, I'm back to your point, and I'll make my smart aleck comment. I do believe that we could raise sales tax by 1.5. I believe we could raise gas tax by 0.5 point. I believe we could migrate over to a consumption tax or value-added tax, depending not the European type, because they don't have a cap on that. I think you'd have to put a cap at about 9% on that. And then the people who are buying these commodities and these luxuries, they're the ones who are doing it. But we've got to take the state surplus. We just had the biggest year ever in terms of surplus. We got to take that state surplus as well, couple that with the cutting of the spending in the budget, and let's buy down property tax so that we get it down. Let's reward those ISDs, school districts who keep low bonds, keep low debts, and then vice versa on the ones who are trying to keep it high. Look, I love Texas Friday night football, but our high school students don't need to play in $60 million stadiums that rival Division II college campuses. They just don't. And then because once you do the bond to build that, guess what? Your local municipalities, they're not going to lower the tax debt. They've already seen that you'll do it. So Let's see if they can get more blood out of a turnip. So to that point, we've got to stop allowing these immoral people, and they are immoral, people who have no value or the sense of a dollar or any kind of idea about what it's going to cost you in the long run. We've got to stop putting them in positions of power to make those decisions. We've got to hold their feet to the fire and keep them accountable. The idea of property tax, it's a Marxist philosophy. The idea that the state owns your property forever, that we ought to get away from that level of communism with everything we've got. But we also need to incentivize the private sector. Let's make sure that, because there's great engineers out there who know how to make the earth flat so we can drive on it. Why do we continually trust in the government and their mediocre job? They cut everything they can, and they do just good enough so that, as we used to say, well, it looks good from the road. And roads in Texas aren't great. We can look at all kind of infrastructure around the state of Texas. It's not great. God knows our education system's not great. It's problematic. We're churning out little Marxists right there in these brainwashing institutions we call public schools, and that's not a slight on educators
and universities. Yes.
Well,
yes.
Public
universities.
I'll give you my 10-second spiel on that. So what we've done is and it's not a public school system; it's a public education system, and that's not a slight to the teachers because the teachers' hands are being tied. Yeah. They had a dream of molding young minds. We've got to untie their hands, let them actually teach, train, test, evaluate, promote. But right now they're indoctrinating because they're being forced to, and they're training for a test. And so our kids are graduating with no sense of self. They go off to these liberal, wackadoodle institutions of higher learning called colleges and universities, and they learn under the tutelage of a tenured guy who spent 30 years in an academic bubble, pushing papers around, never testing his wild-eyed progressive theories in the real world, and they graduate after 4 or 5 years, deeply in debt with a degree in undecided.
Yeah.
All right? So that's what we're churning out, and we wonder what's wrong with the future. Yeah. We've got to burn the whole system to the ground. It's a socialist system. It's built on a humanist system, Dewey and Mann system of education, and we're churning out little Marxists and progressives, people who don't know their identity, their genders, or their pronouns, and then we're kind of normalizing that level of schizophrenia like that's okay in the 21st century. It's not, and it's certainly not Texan. So what we've got to do is we've got to get our priorities right. I mean, you want to put the money right. That's great. I mean, at the end of the day, we can move percentage points and decimal points. That's the math problem. That's the math problem. What we've got is an ideology problem. And we're making ideologies into policies. We're finding ways to spend money just because we know we can get it. Well, that's criminal. So let's get rid of the criminal aspect. That's why I said we got to stop putting immoral people in a place where they're the ones making the decisions. The money is there in the state of Texas. The money is there. The money is there in the state of Texas for whatever we want to do. Maybe if we'd stop subsidizing green energy and bailing those guys out when their windmills fail, we might have a little extra surplus. Mm-hmm. That's just one example. That's just one example. You know, there's 174 plus state agencies. There was 174. Now there's more because of the pandemic. Thank God for big government, right? It just keeps growing. It keeps growing. It keeps growing. How many of those agencies either need to disappear or fold into one another? And let's cut the fat there, save some spending, stop apologizing for what made us a global leader, things like oil and gas. We produce 40% of the nation's oil, 26% of the nation's marketable natural gas. We're the number 2 producer of lignite coal in the nation, and we're apologizing. Our coal plants are turned off. Why isn't it generating energy? It would have been helpful. It would have made the house toasty last February when ERCOT went down. So my point is we're a global leader. We're the 9th largest economy, and the fact that we're now the 6th highest ranked state for property tax, to me, that math doesn't compute.
So have you looked at the Huffines plan, which is basically the Texas Public Policy Foundation's plan? He's modified it a little bit. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, what do you think?
Sure, and it's not a bad plan. It's not a bad plan. I tell Don all the time. I said, as soon as I'm elected, I'm going to make you my tax czar. So, Don looks at this thing from the perspective. Don certainly knows dollars and cents, right?
Yeah, he does.
I just want to make sure that whatever plan is implemented, it's done without growing the government. Let's don't introduce more governmental entities and oversight in order to get a plan passed because it sounds good on paper fiscally. And that's the only thing that scares me there. But I think, obviously that's Don's platform. That's his passion. And I'm thankful for the work that he's done there. I see when Don starts talking to a lot of people that they glaze over a little bit because he's moving a lot of decimal points. I want to encourage people, listen to what Don is saying because it's not wrong. It's not wrong. It's there. It's a reasonable plan. I think it's a solid plan, and I think Don's heart's in the right place in that regard. Don and I say this about Alan as well. We come from a lot of the same perspectives, and we come to a lot of the same conclusions. We just have different methods of delivering that message. That's why I say earlier, Bob, I said I'm running against Gregg Abbott. I'm running alongside them. I wish there were 12 more primary candidates. I really do. Yeah. That's how much I really believe in the anyone but Abbott message. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Danny?
Well, the only way you're going to do it is through a tax swap. That's the only thing that I've seen. And maybe in a few other things. I shouldn't say that's the only thing. Number one is the first step is to do a tax swap. And what I mean by that is there's billions of dollars of sales tax exemptions out there. We're going to have to eliminate a lot of those exemptions. And by doing so, that creates more money for the state of Texas. That's being used as the same as property tax. So literally, you'll take those additional exemptions, the billions of dollars of tax exemptions, and you'll use that additional money, getting rid of those exemptions, to pay down on schools, to pay down on maintenance and things of that nature. Now, can it eliminate property taxes? I don't think so, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And so we need to look under the hood. If I'm given the opportunity to be governor, I'll look at that issue very closely and working with the state comptroller's office and the legislative budget board. At the same time, there's a lot of businesses in Texas, and believe me, I'm pro-business, but there's a lot of businesses, especially large businesses, corporations, that don't pay their fair share in taxes. I can think of many, just down in Corpus Christi alone, a lot of oil and gas refineries and stuff that pay almost nothing in property tax. So that needs to be evened out. I'm all for business and growth. I'm a small business guy, but we need to look at that real closely. And then last but not least, we need to look at new revenue streams. And this is a big issue that separates me from the other candidates running for governor of Texas. I've talked about it, and it may bother people on the religious right, but I've said, man, we're sending billions of dollars of business, hundreds of thousands of jobs across the state line when it comes to tourism, destination points, entertainment and gambling. If we did that right, entertainment and gambling, revitalizing the horse race industry, that's 200,000 jobs. That's a $50 billion circulation of cash to your economy. That's $3 billion to the bottom line of Texas. None of the candidates have talked about this issue at all. Governor Gregg Abbott doesn't even give the citizens of Texas the opportunity to vote, whether you agree or disagree with it. Even if you don't agree with the issue, Texans deserve the opportunity to vote on it, and over 65% of Texans support it. So that's additional revenue, and that could be used to drive down property taxes. Another big issue is legalization of cannabis and medical cannabis and such. And let me talk about this for a second. This is additional revenue that could be used for Texas. Decriminalization. We spend $500, $600, $700 million a year putting people in jail simply for possession of cannabis. They're in jail or they're on probation or parole. That's money that could be used to drive down property taxes. We are the largest agricultural exporter in the nation when it comes to agriculture in regard to soybean, tobacco, cotton, things like cattle, oil and gas, whatever. That cannabis could be used as the same thing. We could use that as a crop to make additional money on. Just the cannabis industry alone, if we did it right, you're looking at another 100,000 jobs. You're looking at about a $30 billion circulation of cash. You're looking at $3 billion to the bottom line. Just between those two things, I've said $6 billion to the bottom line for Texas. Those are additional revenues that could help drive down property taxes, and those are new revenue streams. And none of the candidates have talked about this. This is a major difference between us. And I've talked about it. They haven't. And I think they're afraid to upset the religious right. I'm not, and I'm a man of faith, but I understand when you create commerce, commerce creates additional commerce. And I see the opportunities there. Those other candidates don't see it. They don't have the entrepreneurial vision or the entrepreneurial chops to get it across the goal line, and I do. And those are steps to drive down property taxes and eventually eliminate them, I think.
Okay, well, I want to tackle these then. I want to do a follow-up on all these.
Sure.
Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk. First, Governor Huffines has a plan working with it's actually an expanded plan from what Texas Public Policy Foundation has come up with. Have you taken a look at that plan to eliminate property taxes, and what do you think about it?
Well, I think his plan is the same thing I just talked about at the beginning.
Well, no, he's talking about an elimination of property taxes.
He wants to eliminate them. But you're going to have to do it through a tax swap. He's doing the same thing. He's going to eliminate billions of dollars of sales tax exemptions and then use that money, keep the state budget under control. Hopefully you have surpluses, and over an extended period of time, drive down property taxes. I'm all for that. I think that's a
okay.
Great
So
plan.
the Huffines plans, you're on board with.
I'm on board with it, but the difference is I'm looking for new revenue streams.
Okay. And I want to talk. Okay, I'm willing to go there. I just want to start there.
Okay.
Now, wait a minute. Now, Huffines is arguing that you don't need new income streams. That there is plenty of resources already in place through a sales tax, a consumption tax, that you don't need these other revenue sources?
I think it's quite naive to think that. I don't buy that argument at all. I think you're making a bad decision not going after new revenue streams. Those are opportunities to drive down property taxes and such. And let me tell you, I've heard this argument, well, we're going to use the surpluses and such. You tell on the budget after you keep,
yes.
well, there's no surpluses in this last budget. The only reason we're staying alive right now is because federal money has been infused into the Texas budget and has given us any type of additional money and such. Let's call it the way it is. We've been bailed out by the federal government because we've printed $6-7 trillion worth of dollars. That's why we're in the position that we are right now. We're actually flooded with money. But you have to look at those new revenue streams. I think that's naive.
Okay, but I want to look at those.
Okay.
So I mean, you're actually, I mean, you're definitely differentiating yourself from any other the other candidates, and so and you're really choosing some very controversial ways to do it. Let's talk about gambling. You say 65% of Texans are in favor of it. Where does that come from?
Oh, I've seen it from multiple polls.
What is your source?
Oh, the Texas Tribune. I've seen that from the poll.
Can you provide that for me?
Yes, I can. Yes,
okay.
I can.
Because I want to deal in empirical evidence,
yes,
not in
hearsay.
conjecture. Right.
Also, John T. Monfort, former chancellor of Texas Tech University, a former district attorney up in Lubbock, a former state senator, did a study and also was pushing this issue back 18 years ago. And he talked about the polling was very clear that 62 to 65% of Texans supported it, and that was 8 to 10 years ago. And he was saying that would be a $15 to $20 billion circulation of cash through our economy, and about $1.5 billion to the bottom line.
Yes, but
that was 8 to 10 years ago, and the economy has grown.
No, it was longer than that when they were, and so we when they gave us when we got approved the Texas lottery, when voters said yes to the Texas lottery, the big promise was the state, the funding for education around the state is taken care of, and it turned out to be one great big lie. Why should voters trust you when you say that this will be the income stream? And what evidence? Give me an example of a state that has done it right. Give me an example of where it's worked and what state it works.
Entertainment, gambling, destination points, tourism is not a panacea to solving the problems of Texas. You mentioned the Texas Lotto.
Yes, yes.
Well, it brings in $1 billion every year to the state of Texas. Now, they may throw it in the state budget. Supposedly, it goes directly to public education. I'm not governor. I'm not looking under the hood to look at that very closely. But everything that I've read is $1 billion to the bottom line for Texas every year, and it goes to public education. Whether that's accurate or not, that's what I've read. Okay.
Can you provide us?
Can
you follow up with me on that?
Yes, I can. I will.
Thanks.
But other states. I mean, you got Florida that has entertainment and gambling. You've got obviously Oklahoma does. Okay, get this. In Oklahoma alone, the Choctaw Indian Nation just finished a $600 million expansion of their casinos and entertainment. And remember, it's more than just gambling. This is what people get confused about. And we're talking about a destination point. It's golf courses, it's spas, it's salons, it's great restaurants, it's big-time entertainment. The gambling part is just one piece of the puzzle. It's just a place to have a good time. But when you do a $600 million expansion across the state line, and everybody knows, everybody's there is from Texas. I mean, I've been in those parking lots 100 times. 90% of the license plates are from Texas, for crying out loud.
Sure.
When Louisiana, Tillman Fertitta, the owner of the Houston Rockets, puts in a $750 million Beau Rivage there and somewhere in Louisiana. That was 10 years ago. $750 billion gaming casino, but a full destination resort. That's Texas money, okay? The horse race industry. It's a major industry. Let me talk about that.
No, we have horse racing.
We do.
Okay.
But it's on its deathbed because Governor Gregg Abbott has literally run that industry out of town.
How so?
Because he hasn't given them the tools, the casinos and the gambling to really bring in the larger amounts of gaming, so then they can bring in the big horses and the big, to bring in the big horses from all over the world to do the races. You've got to have the large purses to do that. You have to have the cash flow to pay for the large purses to bring in the big.
Wait a minute. But that is government picking winners and losers now. Now you're talking about, and so help me understand why it's not that. Why
I'm saying is that he doesn't give them historical betting. He doesn't give them the casinos and such. And the reason, and that's what's killing the horse race industry in Texas, because you're not making the amount of money to get the big money, to have the large purses where when the horse wins, they get the amount of money, the victory gets this kind of money.
Right.
And so we need to give them the tools to succeed. You're talking about truckers, feed stores, veterinarians, horse shows, agricultural products. This is a big industry, and it's not a panacea to solving the problems of Texas, but it's one more feather in the cap for Texas, just like oil and gas, just like healthcare and IT. And so when you're talking about entertainment and gambling, horse race industry, legalization of cannabis, these aren't panacea problems to eliminating property taxes, although I would like to do so, but it is additional income that we don't have the luxury to walk away from. And you mentioned something else just a second ago.
Yeah.
I'm rambling a little bit, but I mean, every year they say they balance the budget in Texas. Well, we know there's $100 billion in pension liabilities that they always put on the sidelines. They don't really put that in the full thing. We don't have the luxury to walk away from any type of new revenue stream, okay? And if you're going to drive down property taxes, you need everything that you can get. We don't have that luxury. We have too many infrastructure needs, too many healthcare related needs, and we've got to take advantage of this and see where it leads us. But these are steps that we can do to eventually eliminate property taxes.
So you talked about gambling. The other one was the cannabis. Is that an industry that is actually making a difference in, let's say, states like Colorado? Are they actually, because what it's looking like is that the business plan of that is actually not netting the kind of income that proponents promised?
Well, I think that you have to. I wouldn't use Colorado as an example.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and I think it's now the issue is getting so watered down because there's so many states that are doing it right now. Because when Colorado was the first state to really, then Washington State to legalize it, but everybody went to Colorado like it was a gold rush, and it was every crazy fool went there and such. Think if Texas was the first state to legalize alcohol after Prohibition. I mean, it's crazy. Texas is Texas. We are a business state. We are the #1 agricultural exporter in the nation. It is a great opportunity for our farmers and such and our agricultural growers to take advantage of. It's a great opportunity from a medical cannabis standpoint. Let's talk about that for a second. Over 90% of Texans, and this is something I'll bring to you too. You want that statistic?
No,
I'll show it to you.
I know where this one's going.
Okay. But medical cannabis is hold on, this is a huge deal because you're dealing with, you're talking about veterans. Okay. We've seen, there's some statistics.
Medical. All right. And look, medical marijuana is to me a farce. Mm-hmm. I think it's just smoke and mirrors. The people who are getting medical marijuana, 99% of them, I don't know but most of them, they don't have a medical need for it. So, I mean, I love that you're talking straight with me. Yeah. I'm talking straight with you.
And personally, I could really care less one way or another.
It's a business issue.
I'm looking at it from strictly, I don't even smoke cannabis.
Yeah.
So let's make sure that.
Yeah.
Okay. But I see it from a business standpoint.
Now wait a minute. The opponents may disagree with that. They think you're doing it right now.
Tell them clearly. I don't smoke cannabis. I'm from that standpoint. I drink beer, and that's probably about as wild as I get.
Yeah.
But I do see it from a business standpoint, from saving taxpayers in regard to incarceration. I see it from a medical standpoint. Let's talk about that medical thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about veterans, okay? We've seen a 2,500% increase in pharmaceutical sales over the last decade at our VA hospitals. A lot of these veterans feel like the pills are being shoved down their throat. They want an alternative to managing pain, okay? and they don't want these hard drugs affecting their liver, their kidneys and such. We in the medical cannabis program in Texas, it doesn't work. It's at 0.05% THC levels. What that means is it's not powerful enough. It needs to be like at a 10 to 12% THC level. It'd be like me giving you an aspirin for your headache and giving you 25% of the pill. It wouldn't work. And so when you talk to veterans, when you talk to mothers that have children with autism, which is a major deal. I've talked to some mothers where I was literally in a room and with children.
Yeah, but you're making the medical argument still, and you know we don't establish laws for the minority of the people, because we're talking about the vast majority of the people are not needing this. So I mean, I respect the business side of it, okay, of your argument, from a libertarian point of view.
But I want you to still see, okay, but you still need to listen to this, okay. I'm sitting in a room. I got children with autism, 4 or 5 years old. When I went to the table there was 2 mothers with black eyes in their face, okay? 2 separate mothers sitting there. And the kids hit them because they get wired, they get messed up or whatever, not their own fault. And so these mothers have to go to Colorado to get the cannabis and bring it back here and take that now they're breaking the law, bringing the cannabis here, but they want to take care of their kid.
So they're giving it to the kids?
They give it to the kids as a vapor to help, because they don't because they don't want to pump their kids up with these drugs and mess them up.
Look, Danny, okay, so let's agree on one thing. Neither one of us are doctors. We don't understand medicine, and I like the business point that you're making. You're more of a libertarian.
Well, I think that you can. What I think I am is I'm an independent candidate running on the Republican ticket. Not any different than Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a populist, an independent candidate.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yes, he was. He was
the most Republican person we've ever had in office. Donald Trump reflected the Republican platform better than any president in my lifetime.
Your establishment did everything they could when he was running for
What did you say?
The establishment Republican Party did everything they could to derail his
I
candidacy.
agree. I agree with you.
I felt like, from my perspective, he was an independent populist running on the Republican ticket. Let me finish. And then, I mean, at one time, he had the largest gambling casino in the world with Taj Mahal. At one time, he was talking about Medicare for all. And then over time, he changed and reached out to the religious community. He evolved in regard to abortion and being pro-life and stuff. He evolved partly through age and stuff like that. But I really felt like if he very much almost walked away from the Republican Party and was going to run as an independent, you know. And so, I honestly, if you love Donald Trump, you'll love me, because I'm not any different than he is, really.
All right, yeah, and I think your point's well taken. I mean, it does. You know, I think that I was a Cruz guy more than Trump. I didn't trust him. I didn't think that he would be who he was, and you know, so many of us conservatives were just blown away that this guy actually was the most conservative president in my lifetime, for sure. So yeah, so I appreciate. I think you make some good points there.
Yeah, I mean, I love President. I love President Trump way before his president. I just connected with the guy. He's very common sense. He's very pragmatic. He's easy to understand.
Yeah,
for me personally, I know a lot of people can't stand him, but I love the heck out of him. So
yeah, I miss mean tweets.
Yeah.
Well, the federal government is responsible for protecting our nation's borders, including between Mexico and Texas. However, nowhere in the U.S. Constitution or any congressional statute is immigration enforcement granted solely to the federal government. Supreme Court Justice Anton Scalia expressed this same view by stating, quote, "It seems to me entirely appropriate when the state uses the federal law, as it must, as the criterion for the exercise of its own power and the implementation of its own policies of excluding those who do not belong there," end quote. Therefore, most constitutional conservatives have argued that the state of Texas, as a sovereign political entity, has the inherent authority to enforce its own borders and protect its citizens. Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution guarantees that the federal government shall protect each state of the Union against invasion. Yet, despite the fact that former Vice President Biden has ignored this constitutional mandate, the framers added another guarantee for the states under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, where the states reserved their sovereign authority to act in the protection of their citizens when threatened by invasion or imminent harm. So here's the question. Do you believe that the state of Texas is being threatened by invasion or imminent harm? And if so, how will you work to secure our border and crack down on human traffickers and cartels that bring violent crime to Texas? If not, what must happen for you to support state-initiated action to secure our border? Danny, how would you answer this one?
Oh, that's an easy one for me. The open borders, globalist, evil agenda of the Biden administration, let's call it for what it is. That's exactly what it is. What I would do in regard to the border, and this is what Governor Gregg Abbott's afraid to do. He talks a good game. He puts on a good show, has his National Guard down there kind of acting like almost like a security guard. The difference is, and this is where we have to knock heads with the federal government, we have the constitutional right to protect us from invasion, to protect our health and safety of Texans and Americans, okay? No question about it from my perspective. No doubt I would deploy my National Guard, my Department of Public Safety, work with my local law enforcement if necessary, create my own militia, all right? Whatever it takes. We will engage. We will do the job that the border security isn't doing. Whether they're apprehending them, they're processing them, and then they're releasing them. And they're releasing them all over the country, putting them on planes. You've even heard DeSantis talking about they're dumping them off in Florida in the middle of the night. Nothing to get. I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-illegal immigration, and I understand why these people are coming here. God bless them. But you have to come here legally. So the difference is what I would do is my National Guard, my department, we will engage, we will apprehend them, and we will take them right back to the border on the other side of Mexico, and you will stay there, and you will come through the legal way. We will knock heads with the federal government. And what's happening is Texas is grabbing them and incarcerating them and putting them in jail. We're spending $8 million a month incarcerating, taking care of them, providing food, health care, and all. I'm not going to even get involved in that. I'm going to do the job that Border Patrol is supposed to do. I'm going to take them right back to the other side of the border in a humane fashion. We'll treat them respectfully, but they will not enter in, and that's the difference. And what the unknowns are after that, what the federal government does, how it plays out on the courts, but that's exactly what I would do.
Very good. Chad, what do you think about this?
I always like your caveats to the question. If not,
yeah. I'm hoping that someone will disagree because
we're to be clear, obviously I believe we're under invasion. The reason I say that is because no one is coming across our southern border that's not being aided by the cartels. Everybody's being backed by somebody. They're being funded, they're being sponsored, and ultimately it leads back to the cartels. Here's the problem we have in Texas. We not only have this invasive pressure from the southern border, but we've got internal pressure from Washington, D.C. So there's a target on the back of Texas. They hate our idea of freedom. They hate it. They meaning the bureaucracy of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
2.5 million unelected bureaucrats, the cabal which is the federal government at this point. I continually contend that the globalists have seceded the federal government away from the Constitution and away from the American people. We do not feel unified with Washington, D.C. We don't feel unified with California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, so on and so forth.
Amen.
We don't.
Amen.
So, we're not the United States of America right now. And I hate that that's the rhetoric, but it's the reality.
Yeah.
So D.C. knows that Texas, because of our size and our leverage and our population and our economy, our sense of dignity and will and our history and legacy of identity, they know that we're not just going to bow down and take it ultimately, like California has. They're gone. They're dead. They're done. They're no longer the land of Reagan. It's done.
That's
and
true.
I hate that. California is a beautiful state. There's
Sure
some
is.
beautiful people. There's some great conservatives out there. They're getting screwed over by bureaucracy there. The big cities rule them, and you see what mob rule is producing. It's a woke mob rule. Wokeism and progressivism destroyed California. Taxed to death. I don't have to get into California. Number one state in America for agriculture and ranching, and it's gone. It's gone. It's done. Texas is headed that way. They know that between China's influence here in the state of Texas, and that's really bad. Whole other story there of how they've basically bought our Western heritage, and they do. They own the Sixes Ranch. China, their conglomerates own the Sixes Ranch now, the biggest horse ranch in our Western heritage. People will love watching the show Yellowstone. It's owned by China. It's a paramount company. So we're under attack here. Washington, D.C. wants us to fall. That's why these illegals are being brought to the southern border of Texas. If you turn on the television, turn on the news, you don't see the southern border of New Mexico, Arizona, or California. It's just Texas. Why is it Del Rio? Why is it Eagle Pass? Because they want Texas to fall. They need Texas under pressure. And so if the rest of America is looking to Texas to say, well, how are you guys doing it? And we're not doing it well, it's not going to be good for the rest of the nation. Because I think that we're that anchored rock of freedom and sense of liberty, that the rest of the nation sort of anchors to and hopes that that rock stays stable. And right now, the foundation is starting to shake a little bit. So we have, all of these illegals that are coming across. And I've seen the video of the National Guard helping them out of the river into the state. They're disappearing under cover of night out of Del Rio and Valverde County on white buses. They're in McAllen and Harlingen, leaving out of the airport by the hundreds, if not thousands, every single day with a manila envelope that says, I don't speak English, help me get to the right gate. I've seen it. I've flown on the airplanes with them. They're going into the interior country of the country. 47,000 so far from last year have failed to report. They had the notice to report. They haven't shown back up anywhere. Did we expect they were going to? Of course not.
Right.
So we have a couple million a year that are coming across. And at what point in time, people say, well, we can't do anything about it. The federal government won't let you. Well, you just read the constitutional amendments. We know that we have state sovereignty and a state's right, especially afforded us by the 10th Amendment. At what point in time do we stand up and say, we're not asking the federal government's permission anymore? This is not a mother may I scenario. This is our border. So whereas the federal government does have a say in immigration, ultimately we have the final say in who comes across our border. We protect our borders. Now, the federal government can handle naturalization, but we can control immigration. We can control who comes across. So at some point in time, we've got to enforce the laws on the books that are actually on the books. We don't need new laws. Let's just enforce the ones we've got. Put our National Guardsmen, put our State Guard, put our militias down there, put our DPS, all the human and material resources on that border, and not just a physical wall where it's geographically and feasibly possible, but a human wall that says, no, you're not getting out of this river. You are not getting out of the river. But we know that the cartels are funding this. The cartels in Acuna across from Lake Amistad across from Del Rio, they're making $25 million a week. In some parts of the border, the cartels are making $14 million a day. What are they making it off of? Organ harvesting, human trafficking, sex trafficking, the fentanyl, the cocaine, the opiates that are coming across. This is a bad, bad situation. We know that. And these poor folks are, and I mean that, these poor folks are coming to America because they've been incentivized to come. For healthcare, welfare, education, we're putting them in college classes. We're paying for all of these things. We're housing them. We've got to disincentivize that. I keep saying we've got to disincentivize. Here's all my D's. You got to disincentivize. You got to detect. You got to deter. You got to detain. You got to deport. But you got to defend. There's no such thing as a complex problem that can be solved while still being politically correct. We cannot do this and be politically correct. So I have numerous things, some a little bit far-fetched, some of them pretty accurate ways of disincentivizing this. Like, for instance, we should add a 12 to 14% transaction fee to all bank transactions in the state of Texas that are being transacted by illegals. Oklahoma does that now with 1%. They put $14 million in the state coffers every single year because of transactions being done by illegals. Well, we have more illegals here, and we're a bigger state, so let's do 12 to 14%. Let's make it impossible for illegals to do business in the state of Texas without Texas profiting off of it. Okay, we control the 25 bridges that come over into the state of Texas from Mexico. We need to have a strip that's about 30 miles in from the border. That needs to be a no-go zone. From the river 30 miles out, that needs to be an absolute, completely policed and monitored no-go zone where we make sure that these traffickers, these cartel members, these coyotes are not getting away with what they're doing. Just last week, we had 5 convicted murderers that were arrested in Laredo. We had 1 convicted rapist. How many are getting across? Slap on the hand at a processing center, turn them loose, and or deport them right back across, and they come back in within a week. This is the kind of thing that we've got to stop. I mean, look, we have, saying what I said about having the pressure on the federal government, if we truly established ourselves the way we should, according to the 10th Amendment, Article 4, Section 7 of the Texas Constitution says that in a situation like this, it's up to the governor to become the commander-in-chief and to make the state guard do this enforcement. We're not equipping our state guard. They're not prepared. They're not equipped. They're not ready. They're not big enough to do that. So if they do pull the Texas National Guard off on the federal level, then we're in trouble. That's why we also need to be equipping a very constitutional word, the militias that are out there, put them under authority and put them in a place where they can actually operate, and also equip citizens. Because let's face it, that border is sacred. Your land is sacred. We're talking about property taxes. You got to be able to protect your property.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not talking about going out there and shooting women and children. I'm talking about people with tattoos on their face and shaved heads. You know who they are, and you know why they're coming. These are people who are shooting at our people every morning on the border. They do not have orders to fire back. Do you think our founding fathers would put up with this? Our founding fathers would not sit there at that border.
They
didn't.
They proved it.
They didn't. So we sit there. We want to be politically correct and say, oh, it's a humanitarian crisis. Oh, it's really about to be a major humanitarian crisis on this side of the border if we don't stop this. But we've got to put economics pressure on Mexico to stop this. But we're absolutely under invasion. It's only going to increase. But again, the problem is not just the invasion coming from the south. It's the pressure coming from Washington, D.C. that makes us not do the job that we constitutionally are capable of doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Huffines, again, another flagship of your campaign, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
We are being invaded. This is an invasion. It's unarguable. This is a premeditated attack on Texas. I think that's unarguable also. I say that's one of the main reasons that this election is the most important election, this election being the primary for the governor of Texas, for the Republican Party of Texas, is the most important election in the country in 22. And I say this often, I think it could show to be one of the most important elections in the history of our country. I say that because the federal government's never going to secure the border. They never have, and they never will. Trump, the most courageous president we've ever had, when we had the trifecta in Washington, the House, the Senate, and the presidency, it still wasn't secure.
I know. It's shocking.
It is. So the only chance, Bob, we have of securing that border is with a courageous governor of Texas. It's the only way it's going to happen. We have 64% of the border, 1,253 miles of it. This is about Texas. This is about securing the Texas border as much as it is the federal border. Of course, it's been on my website since we entered the race in May. I'm going to finish the wall, or most of the wall, Trump's wall. We'll call it a Texas wall.
Love it.
I'm going to build it for 300, and I think our number is about 375 miles, and it's going to cost like $3.5 billion. But as a business guy, I think that's a good trade. I'll take it because it's less than a 1-year payback for what we spend on illegal immigration.
No kidding.
And so, but the most fundamental part of my plan is that I'm never asking permission from the federal government to secure the Texas border. It's not necessary. Texas already has the authority to secure the border.
Yes.
And it's in my favorite document. My second favorite is state party platform. My favorite document. It is. I love our party platform.
Yeah, I do too.
But it's a great platform. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the U.S. Constitution clearly gives the governor an authority to stop an invasion.
Yes.
and it's called for in Article 4, Section 4 that the federal government needs to, but that's immaterial because there's a lot of things they're supposed to do they don't.
That's right.
It's Article 1, Section 10 that's the most important. It allows the states to repel an invasion.
Yes.
And what it essentially was written for is the state could do about anything it needed to do if it was being invaded and the federal government's not coming to their aid. You can charge a tax, you can negotiate a treaty with a foreign power, you can solicit military support, and they'll be doing all of that. I'll be using the entire Texas military. Plus, we need more than what Texas offers. We're going to need other states to participate, which I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
The rules of engagement are quite simple. It's to repel an invasion. We're not going to be enforcing immigration law. We're going to be stopping an invasion. Anyone gets across the river, we're going to immediately deport them to the other side of the river. It's not complicated.
You're not going to bring them in
and every boat that gets on our side will be sunk or destroyed immediately, all the little rafts. And then we'll gather them, all the folks up that get there, and they're going to send them right back to the other side of the river.
Love it.
But here's the most important part. If Mexico doesn't cooperate, it's really hard to secure that border.
Yeah.
And so there's 25 bridges over that river, as I remind everybody. I'm going to stop most of all inbound commercial traffic from Mexico. This is inbound commercial traffic only. And that's to put the economic pressure on Mexico until they secure their side of the river and take it back from the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world, the Mexican cartels. And I think they can do that. I think they're a strong enough country they can finally step up and make that happen because they love making money. There's a lot of really rich people in Mexico. There's 10,000 18-wheelers crossing Laredo a day.
Wow.
And when they can't get that stuff in, they'll be squealing from Ottawa to Washington. Every road that leads to every bridge is a state road.
Yeah, it's a state highway. Yeah.
You paid for it.
That's right.
You maintain it. We maintain it. We can do anything we want. We can unmaintain it.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to get the pressure on Mexico.
Yeah.
And they're being a really bad neighbor. And they are. I love Mexico and I love Mexicans, but they're being a really bad neighbor. I'm going to get done in 30 days, which has never been done before, because I'm the actual Republican running that's actually going to do something.
Well, if when elected governor, what will be your priorities in your first 4 years, Mr. Huffines?
Well, of course, my campaign promises made will be ones kept, as I've always proven that. I've got the legislative history to prove that. And, as you mentioned, I was always ranked one of the most conservative state senators in Texas history. And,
yes.
And I delivered on all that, and I'll do it again. As, of course, secure the border and phase out property taxes and make sure we've got confidence in our elections. And that's with enforcement of the laws. I'm creating a new division of Department of Public Safety to enforce our election laws. And we're going to move rangers involved in that. We're going to have a separate court system. We're going to have a separate prosecution system so we can move venues out of the counties where these violations occur. And it's called Government Corruption Election Integrity Division. And it's solely focused on that and that only. They're going to be familiar with all the election laws. They're not going to do dope or murder or anything else. They're going to follow the ballots. They're going to know where the ballots are stored, who's got the software, what the election laws are. They'll be where they're being counted. I hope to go to all paper ballots. Of course, I've called for a forensic audit of the 2020 elections, and that needs to be a third-party forensic audit. I'm a business guy. I love third-party forensic audits of everything, including every agency down there. There's a lot of thieves everywhere. I uncovered that big political corruption scandal in Dallas County and got 6 people put in prison. So I'm very familiar with how much corruption's in government. But so those 3 issues are very important. And beyond that, it's our culture. It's our faith. For instance, I plan on getting prayer back in every classroom in the state of Texas. I'm not worried about the litigation because I'm never asking permission from the federal government to do anything. I'm going to get biblical studies in our junior highs. I'm going to make sure we appoint patriots to our board of regents of all of our universities that believe in Jesus, that believe in the exceptionalism of America, and they get rid of all the socialists and that are running these universities and poisoning our teachers. And I'm stopping all the pornography in our schools and the CRT. I mean, I've already been way out front of all that, stopping all the transgender ideology and all that. This is a culture war.
Awesome. Danny?
You got to push back on federal intervention. We've talked about that. Federalized elections, the green energy plan that may destroy our oil and gas industry by overregulating it, vaccine passports, vaccine mandates. We have to push back on that. That cannot happen in Texas. We cannot let that happen and fight back on this open border policy. That's craziness. So there's number one priority. Number two is double checking and making sure that we do have voter integrity in Texas. We got to make sure that we audit and continue to audit and look at funny, fishy things that are going on to make sure that people have faith in their electoral system. Then the next step is eliminating property tax. We talked about that earlier. That's a top priority. And then I would say another priority would be in public education in regard to, I want more emphasis on the trades, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, things of that nature. It's a boom. We have a lack of journeymen in this state of Texas. I work in construction on a daily basis. I hear about it all the time. I want to push that in our public education. And last but not least, and we've talked about this before, we have to have a governor that is willing to embrace new revenue streams. This is the major difference between me and the other candidates running for governor. We have to have a governor that's going to talk about this. Why don't we get the opportunity to have entertainment and gambling in Texas? Why don't we get the opportunity to vote on it? Because Governor Gregg Abbott's more than happy to take money from gambling interests from all over the country, put it in his campaign, use it, but not give Texans the opportunity. Whether you agree or disagree with the issue, most Texans believe at least you should have the opportunity to vote on it, okay? And so I support that issue of new revenue streams. I support taking steps toward legalization of cannabis, strictly from a commerce standpoint, but also I'll take it a step further in protecting our young people too. I don't want any of our young people to smoke tobacco, drink underage or whatever, or smoke cannabis. But we know that takes place. I'm not naive. It does. But I would rather, if Texas legalizes cannabis, we now regulate it. So if they access the product, hopefully they access it from a regulated market than from a drug dealer. You follow me? It's not any different when you were a young kid or I was a young kid and I had a fake ID and I got beer or something like that. It's the same thing. And so I think it's a step in protecting our young people, because what happens is sometimes the cannabis can be laced with another drug and young people can get hurt by it. So I'm the only candidate talking about new revenue streams, and this is a major difference between me and the other candidates.
I would agree. Yeah. Chad, how about you?
Well, the border's got to be number one. The border's got to be number one. Whoever gets in there, that needs to be their bully pulpit, because that's going to make Texas fall quicker than anything else. It's unsustainable in terms of what it puts economic pressure on us, as well as just diminishing the culture of Texas. Folks are not coming here to assimilate, that's for certain.
That is true.
To that degree, I think we've got to be careful who we're letting in from other states as well. There's an invasion coming from California, specifically Silicon Valley, that our governor is enabling. So we've got to make sure that legacy of Texas and our borders and what happens inside these borders stays intact. That legacy stays protected. I often joke, I say, I wish there was a way that we could make it where if you move to the state of Texas, there'd be a 4-year probationary period before you can vote.
Before you can vote? I love it. I
want you to catch the spirit of Texas before you know what you're engaged in.
Yeah.
Property tax is another major issue, because I think it's an immoral issue. I think we've got to make sure that we absolutely get into that and make it where people, I think people 65 and over should immediately not have property taxes. I think people who are veterans shouldn't have to have property taxes. I mean, there's immediate things that need to be done. We got to get on that. Another thing is the energy thing. We've got to stop apologizing for what's made us great. Oil, gas, and coal have made us great. We've got to stop making ideologies into policies. And stop subsidizing these failure energy things that are getting us in all kinds of trouble, and bailing out the woke greenies, so to speak. We've got to do that. We've also got to make sure, I go back to the sanctity of life. I want to make sure that we are a sanctity of life sanctuary state. We really are. And we're promoting that and pushing that. I do believe in the abolishment of abortion. I believe that life is created in the image of God, and whether that happens by accident or by assault, it's still a life in the image of God. And we've got to make this a state that is safe, obviously for families and for children, for women, but at the same time we've got to value human life. And the grand goal is to get government out of our life. Get it smaller, get it out of our life. You know, Sam Houston said to govern wisely and as little as possible. And I think there's a lot of profound wisdom in that.
Well, and you know, if you go to the San Jacinto Battleground, and you will at the museum there, they actually have Sam Houston's dictionary there, and there's one word crossed out in that dictionary, and it's compromise. Are you gonna cross that word out in your dictionary?
100%. Let me tell you my attitude towards compromise. So whenever those House reps took off and hid under Nancy Pelosi's skirt in Washington D.C. rather than finish the session, I would have been on the news on my hands and knees changing the locks on their office doors. Okay, I would have taken their chairs off of the House floor and burned them out on Congress. They would have been stripped of all rights in terms of their committees. They abandoned office. We would have fired them from their positions. We would have made an absolute example out of them. At the end of the day, you know, that's not Texan. When you put your shoulder to the plow and you lean into the job, you don't quit until the job's done, no matter how hard the job is. And that is the spirit of Texas. You know, we talk about Sam Houston, we talk about San Jacinto, we talk about, you know, these folks who shirk their responsibility in Texas, we talk about compromise. Since 1800, Texas has never mustered more than 1,000 fighting men. With less than 1,000 fighting men, Sam Houston won the independence of Texas. We became our own nation. We became our own republic. It doesn't take a lot of fighting Texans in order to get something done. And that's because that spirit of Texas that I keep alluding to, it's a clarion call. It brings people like William Travis. It brings people like Davy Crockett. It brings people like James Bowie. It brings these men, Sam Houston, to a state of Texas because they hear liberty. They hear liberty. Liberty is a harmonic resonance. You can pick up on it. And once you catch that and you know that like attracts like, people come running to that form of liberty. Right now, that's why a place like Florida and Ron DeSantis is so doggone attractive to Americans. It's captured their attention because they're leading the way and they're pushing back on Washington, D.C. That's Texas' legacy.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, I appreciate that very much. You know, I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I thank all the candidates for their time to answer these questions and give you a little straight talk of their own. But I want to give each one of them the opportunity to speak directly to you, the voter, about why they are the best person to receive your vote this election. So with that, Mr. Prather, it's all yours.
You know, when I jumped into this race back in 2020, I was a reluctant candidate. This was not an aspiration for me to get involved in career politics, and I still don't have that desire to do that. You know, I've always said that when the insiders are threatened by the outsiders, it's time to make the outsiders or the insiders outsiders. It's time to move those people out. And we have people who are sitting in Austin, Texas, with almost on a throne of power and tyranny. And I'm tired of feeling the tyranny. We shouldn't feel tyranny here in Texas, but right now we're feeling it from Washington, D.C. We're feeling it from Austin. We're feeling economic tyranny. We're feeling judicial, educational tyranny. We're feeling corporate and even medical tyranny. My neck is starting to hurt from all of the boots that have been on the back of it. So at some point in time, we've got to get government out of our lives. You know, I've said over and over again, Sam Houston's quote about govern wisely and as little as possible. I think our founding fathers at this stage in the game would be rolling over in their graves if they knew how much liberty we're willing to give up in the name of comfort and safety and convenience. In 1773, our founding fathers went out into Boston Harbor, and they started spilling tea into those cold black waters under the cover of night as a protest against King George and his tyranny over a 3% tax and taxation without representation. How much more are we being taxed in many ways, and our liberties are being stolen and tyranny is ruling over us? So I keep encouraging people around the state of Texas, we need to go down to Travis County and we need to have ourselves an Austin Tea Party. It's time to get that tyranny out of our lives. Somebody said to me recently from a newspaper, they said, if you make it to Austin, how do you think you'll handle it, since Austin's not like the rest of Texas? I said, well, that's very telling, since that's their capital. Why isn't Austin like the rest of Texas? But it stands to reason that the mob is ruling, and the mob has become very woke and progressive in the way that they're trying to direct our state. I like to call them the blueberries in the chili, whether it's Dallas or Fort Worth, El Paso, San Antonio, Houston, or even that hub, which is Austin. It's time to put the power of freedom and liberty and constitutional rights back in the hands of Texans. true Texans, real Texans, the folks out there that are working hard to make this state great. I promise you, as governor, I will put your priorities first, because right now they're not being listened to, they're not being heeded, and they're not considered important by those who have that delegated representative authority in Austin, Texas. Let's make a change. Let's make those insiders the outsiders. Prather2022.com.
Danny?
First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here. I really do, to help spread our message, because we've been shut down by the establishment, even quote the anti-establishment. That's really the establishment as far as I'm concerned. When the elections took place for President of the United States, I felt like after that election was over, it was a fraudulent election. I really believe that. Now, that's just my opinion. When the riots took place, and let me say this, did you hear anything from Governor Gregg Abbot on this issue? Did you hear him say one word about that issue? He didn't say anything. He heard nothing about the election for president. When the riots took place in Washington, D.C., I thought it was a setup. I thought here we had millions of Trump supporters there, and there was hardly any security there at all. Nothing. There was really nothing there. Knowing that there was going to be millions of people there, they were upset. Where was the security? Where was the National Guard? What was going on there? I thought it was a setup. A lot of people may not believe that. That's what I believe. But did you hear anything from Governor Gregg Abbott on that issue? When the President of the United States was shut down on Twitter and Facebook, did you hear anything from Governor Gregg Abbott on this issue? You heard nothing. When they had the sham impeachment trial, and I thought it was a sham, did you hear anything from Governor Gregg Abbott on that issue? You heard nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to have a governor that speaks boldly, passionately, aggressively on issues at the state, national, and international level. And I don't think Governor Gregg Abbott fills that void. I think we've got to have a governor that speaks aggressively on these types of issues, or these types of issues that took place in our country. Do you even hear anything from Governor Gregg Abbott about the Chinese buying land in the state of Texas? You hear nothing. I think Texas deserves something different. Heck, in Texas, you don't even get the opportunity to vote for entertainment and gambling in Texas, because Governor Gregg Abbott's more than happy to take money from gambling interests but not give you the opportunity to vote on it. We need a governor desperately where the pendulum swings back to the hardworking men and women of Texas, the small businessmen and women of Texas, and somebody that's at the street level that really understands where they're coming from. And that's why I'm asking for your vote. That's why I'm asking for your support. I'm speaking from the heart. I'm speaking from the gut. Thank you for taking a moment to listen to me. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless Texas.
Mr. Huffines.
Oh, thank you, Bob.
Yes, sir.
Well, just imagine a Texas where you don't have to rent your property from the government. You know, you can actually own your own home, your own business. Imagine a Texas where the border's totally secure. And you don't have to worry about the fentanyl and the sex trafficking and the human trafficking and the illegals that are costing you billions and billions of dollars in your school system, your healthcare system. And we stop all the magnets that attract them here with my legislation for E-Verify and everything like that, so they can self-deport themselves out of Texas. Imagine a Texas where you got confidence in that your votes are being counted and not stolen. And we stop government corruption. Imagine a Texas where we win the culture war, where we restore the culture that made Texas special. I am not here to really work with the other side. I am here because we're tired of being on the defense. We're tired of always giving in, and compromising. And what does that mean? That means we just get more socialism, which always leads to communism, and it leads to tyranny, and the horrors are really unimaginable. That's where we're all headed. We all know that, and we're all out of time. And I tell you this, my battles in Austin, Texas were generally with the Republicans and not the Democrats. They're the enablers. Our current governor is an enabler. We've lost more Liberty Patriots in the last 19 or 20 months than I thought we could lose in lifetimes. And like I said earlier, it was done to us by a Republican governor of Texas. Our state and our country is desperate and thirsty for courageous leadership. And a Huffines administration, I'm going to buck up every Republican governor in this country. We're going to change the dynamics of the political perspective and the Republican Party in this country. I'm going to prove to the rest of the country what it means for Texas to be sovereign. I'm never asking permission from the federal government. I'm going to light up the lighthouse of our economic liberty, our personal liberty, and blind those socialists from New York to San Francisco to that swamp in Austin. Because this is Texas. We're never going to bend a knee to no man, to no government for no reason. Because this is Texas. I'm telling you, our greatest days are yet to dawn. This is our time. We're going to get our swagger back. Go to donhuffines.com, Huffines, and sign up for this revolution. And the only ammunition we need is our love of Texas. God bless you.
Well, I want to thank all three candidates for their willingness to come into the bunker and answer questions that conservative-minded voters deserve to hear. If you have more questions of them or wish to know more about their campaigns, I posted links to their websites in the description of today's show. And better still, I would encourage you to let them know if they've earned your vote and why. If you found this show helpful and informative, please hit the like button or smash the rumble key. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel so that you can stay up to date on the forefront of conservative politics in and around the great state of Texas. Remember that you're watching this because you want to be an informed voter, so be sure to share the link of this program with your friends and neighbors. And don't forget that early voting has already begun and ends on Friday, February 25th, and Election Day is Tuesday, March 1st. It was Thomas Jefferson who said that when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. We are a country of the people, by the people, and for the people, and the only way for us to keep it that way is for you to get out and vote for conservatives who will uphold and protect our liberty. So, until next time, I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, looking forward to seeing you at the polls. Blessings.